All right, guys, so we're going to look at 2.3. So it's going to be similar to 2.2, except today we're going to be doing multiplication and division. We're going to be using multiplication and division. And so we can multiply or divide something from both sides of an inequality. So it's very similar to equations. We can multiply both sides or divide both sides by the same thing. And when we do that, we can get the variable by itself. So that's what we're trying to get at. That's what we're trying to do. So we look at this first one here. We have x over 8. X divided by 8 is greater than negative 5. So whenever we're dealing with a fraction, we're going to multiply both sides by whatever's on the bottom. So what's on the bottom of this fraction? 8. So we're going to multiply both sides by 8, because the 8 and 8 will cancel out, and what I'm left with is x is greater than, well, negative 5 times 8 is what? Negative 40. And that's all we have to do for this one here. We just need to multiply both sides by 8. So negative 40. Will the circle be opened or closed? Open, because it's not equal to. Now we shade to the left or to the right? So what are we saying? X is so we shade to the right because x is bigger. X is greater than negative 40. So we shade all the points that are greater than negative 40. So that would be to the right. Questions on this here? Let's look at the next one. We have negative 24 is less than or is greater than or equal to 3x. So what would we do here? Because this whole section here is going to be with multiplication and division. So are we going to multiply or divide? We're going to divide both sides by 3. Because 3 divided by 3 will simplify out, leaving me with just x. Sign doesn't change. Well, negative 24 divided by 3 will give us negative 8. Since we had 3x, 3 times x in the starting equation, since they're being multiplied, to undo multiplication, we divide. So we divided both sides by 3. So here, negative 8 is greater than or equal to x. So is x bigger than negative 8 or going to be smaller than it? Smaller. So we would shade to the left. Now would the circle be opened or closed? Closed. So we would fill it in. And we get this here. And we get this here. Any questions on this here so far? N over 7 is greater than or equal to negative 1. N divided by 7 is greater than or equal to negative 1. So what do we need to do to get the variable by itself? What do we need to do to get the variable by itself? We need to multiply both sides by 7. And I'm going to write it out this time. When we multiply both sides by 7, we multiply the top. So what we will get is 7n over 7 is greater than or equal to, well, negative 1 times 7 will give us negative 7. Anything divided by itself is 1, so 7 over 7 would reduce to just n. So we get that n is greater than or equal to negative 7. So we multiplied both sides by 7, and it's simplified, giving us n is greater than or equal to negative 7. I'll just bring the line down here. Now at negative 7, are we going to have an open circle or a closed circle? So we look back at this here, and because it's equal to, it will be closed. Now do we shade to the left or to the right? Do we all agree shade to the right? We would shade to the right because it is greater than, n is greater than or equal to negative 7. So we would shade to the right. Any questions on anything we've done so far? Any questions on any of these here? Are we good with these here? Yes? So let's do this last one here, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So we have negative 6.4 is greater than or equal to 1/5 W. Well, 1/5 W is the same as W divided by 5. But what we can do is if we have a fraction being multiplied, we can do one of two things. I can either divide both sides by the fraction, so I can divide both sides by 1/5. Because 1/5 divided by 1/5 will cancel, leaving W by itself. And this side here, I can type that into a calculator. You can type negative 6.4 divided by 1/5 into the calculator and go on and try that. See what you get. Did y'all agree? So negative 32. So we can do it that way. So we would get negative 32 is less than or equal to negative W, or less than or equal to W. So would we leave the circle open, or would we fill it in? It'd be closed. We fill it in. Do we shade to the right or to the left? To the left, because we're all the numbers less than W. Any questions on this here? What we could have done is I could multiply both sides by 5, because it works out 5 times 1/5 actually cancels. And we would get the same thing, because 5 times negative 6.4 is going to give us negative 32. It'd give us the same thing. We could flip the fraction over and multiply both sides by it. So here we'd be multiplying both sides by 5 over 1, or just 5. So we can flip the fraction. Any other questions on solving these inequalities and graphing them? Y'all, did you see another example of one of these? Okay. So if we're good with multiplication and division, we'll look at this next part here. And this next part here is crucial for multiplying and dividing. And it only applies when we are multiplying and dividing both sides of an inequality. So if we multiply or divide by a negative, the inequality sign changes from greater than to less than, or less than to greater than. So when you multiply or divide by a negative number, the sign flips. So looking at this first one here, we have 2 is less than y divided by negative 3. So to get y by itself, what are we going to have to do to both sides? Both sides by negative 3. Because we multiply both sides by negative 3, Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Is less than. Over here, we're going to have negative 3y divided by negative 3. Well, anything divided by itself is 1. So those that simplify to 1, and we get y by itself. But whenever I multiply or divide by a negative, the sign has to change. We have to flip the sign because we multiplied or divided by a negative. Now, if it's equal to, if we had greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, it still would be equal to. We're just changing it from greater than to less than or less than to greater than. Now here, because it's not equal to, will we fill it in? Do we shade to the right or to the left? We shade to the left because, again, it's saying negative 6 is negative 6 is greater than y. Which one's bigger? Negative 6. So our value should be smaller than it. Our value should be smaller than negative 6. Any questions on this one here? So negative 7y is less than or equal to negative 35. So we need to get the value of y by itself, yes? What do I need to do to get y by itself? Multiply, divide, add, subtract. What would we do? We would? We wouldn't multiply, we would divide by negative 7. Because since negative 7y are already being multiplied, if I'm going to undo multiplication, I have to divide. So we would divide both sides by negative 7. And negative 7 divided by negative 7 will simplify to 1. Negative 35 divided by negative 7, we can plug that in a calculator, and we get what? 5. And remember here, I divided by a negative. Anytime we divide by a negative, we have to flip the sign. Anytime we multiply or divide by a negative, the inequality sign changes, it flips. So it goes from less than to greater than. So we had less than or equal to. Because we divided by a negative, it has to change to greater than or equal to. And we have this here. Now, will the circle be opened or closed? Closed, because it's equal to. Then when we shade to the left or to the right? So y is what? Greater than, so we would shade to the right because it's greater than, it's bigger than it. So we would shade to the right. Any questions on any of this here? So we need to get the value of p by itself. How would I get the value of p for this equation here by itself? What would I need to do to both sides? I need to multiply both sides by negative 4. Because the negative 4 and negative 4 will eventually simplify, because when I multiply by negative 4, I get negative 4p over negative 4. 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. Now again, because we multiplied by a negative, I have to do what to the sign? I have to switch it. Anytime we multiply or divide by a negative, we have to change the inequality sign from greater than to less than, or less than to greater than, or from greater than or equal to less than or equal to, or from less than or equal to greater than or equal to. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 will be 1. So we have p is greater than negative 28. So would the circle be opened or closed? It'd be open because it's not equal to. So p is greater than negative 28. So what value is bigger, p or negative 28? Because it says p is what? Is that greater than or less than? So this is greater than. P is bigger. So again, when we multiply or divide by negative, it was less than, but because we divided by negative, it had to flip from less than to greater than. Because anytime we multiply or divide by negative, we have to flip the sign from less than to greater than, or from greater than to less than. Any questions on this here? We good with these here? Do we need to see another example of anything we've done today? We good with these here? All right, if we're good with this here, let's move on. And we didn't do anything with